Now available in paperback, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Pick up your copy of John Haynes at Death's Door at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Hi everyone, it's Shawn here with a comic review video. And many of my viewers have been asking me to do a review of the Batman Spawn crossover that's been published by DC and Image Comics. Now this book comes almost 30 years to the date of the original Batman and Spawn crossover books, which came out in the 90s, and I remember having one of those books, but I just don't know what happened to that book. I believe that book was done by Mark Texiera. It was called War Devil, and it really wasn't my cup of tea, but this Batman Spawn crossover was pretty decent, and one of the things I really liked about this crossover was this was one of those rare occasions that we got an actual balanced portrayal of Batman, because in your recent Chip Zdarsky run, things have gotten so absurd that your Batman basically is surviving re-entry out of outer space without a spacesuit, and that was one of the facepalm moments I've ever had as related to Batman comics these days, where he's basically a Gary Stu who is capable of basically overdoing the most insane things that he was never able to do. And I'm just happy for once to see an actual human Batman who has flaws and vulnerabilities, and I have to say that Todd McFarlane hasn't lost a step as related to his writing, which is very sharp on this issue. Now this issue opens up on two different worlds. We see your Bruce Wayne and your Al Simmons coming from two different walks of life, with two different women in their life and two different tragedies. We see Bruce Wayne, the rich boy who comes from money, with a mother that he loves, who he loses when his parents get killed in Crime Alley. And then we see Al Simmons, a guy who's had to fight in the streets, who struggled with money, but wound up losing his beautiful wife, Wanda, and also lost his own life in a tragedy that led to him becoming Spawn. So we get a great opening page, which just opens up with the contrast between both characters and does a great job of showing us how their tragedies led to them becoming the men that they were going to become. Now, your Batman and your Spawn, I love this double page spread again, showing us the contrast between both characters and their missions and approaches to life. And that Batman Spawn symbol looks very interesting, and I think it foreshadows into later parts of the story. And all of this leads to some very intriguing pages. I'm sorry I missed that. That leads into the main story about these two different worlds and your Spawn going into the DC universe as they're confronting the priests in the Scorched storyline and the Court of Owls. And I like the way Todd organically blends both worlds and makes for a great crossover story. Now, what's really interesting here about the Batman Spawn crossover is that it seems to take place in an alternate DC universe, not the prime DC universe, because a lot of the designs come from the New 52, which basically make it a bit more horror-oriented as related to the story. So it kind of flows organically into that horror theme, but Todd has a better grasp of Bruce Wayne, as I see it, than your Tom King, your James Tynion IV, or your Chip Zdarsky, and that is one of the high points of this comic. And I also like the way he handles Spawn in this book, showing that his more lethal approaches are very different than Bruce Wayne's, and showing that Bruce has a moral compass and he has a boundary to how far he will go. Now, his part, I'll go back to it again. Your Al Simmons story starts out with him with The Scorched, which is a fantastic book I highly recommend you go pick up. And he's going to go take care of some business as related to this interdimensional portal between these two worlds, which can possibly lead to either Wanda or Martha Wayne coming back. And as we enter that part of the story, we go to Bruce's part of the story where he's thinking about the tragic day of his parents' death, and he wants to go out here and drop the roses like he usually does in Crime Alley on the date of his mother's death, but the bat signal is up in the air, so he's got to take care of that business before he can go out here and take care of his own personal issues. And those issues again lead into the storyline, and we get again fantastic setup, fantastic sequences that open up the book and lead to a confrontation between your Batman and Spawn eventually, as he runs into this Court of Owls guy with this set of pearls, which ties to the plot as related to opening the portal between the two worlds, which can possibly bring back Martha Wayne's soul to the DC universe. So this pearls really tie into the story because again, the pearls were taken off Martha's neck in that tragic day. And again, this all taking place in Crime Alley with the Court of Owls, which are trying to set Batman up to have a confrontation to open up this portal between these two universes. And then we have Spawn coming in, looking to deal with these pearls, which tie to the whole issue as related to the portal. So everything here is very interesting. And again, this confrontation between Batman and Spawn showing his necro powers and Batman just basically being a human being. One of the things that's good here is that we see, again, a complete contrast between the characters, but the great contrast we see here is how human Batman is in his own book, because if this book were written by a Chip Zdarsky or a James Tynion IV or one of these other comic book writers, they would have possibly had him take out some sort of talisman or some sort of magic thing that he would come out of his utility belt with as a deus ex machina, and this would not end in a good fashion because Todd understands that Batman's greatest tool is his brain. Now, Todd understands that Batman is known for the best part of him is his humanity, and it's his humanity that allows him to overcome in any situation, and that is what leads to this confrontation ending up in a draw, because your Batman knows how to go out here and think critically and not just go out here and attack on emotion. So this is where he holds the advantage, and he doesn't go out here and use his go out here thinking that power is everything. He sees where Spawn's weakness is, and again, just extremely well done writing from Todd as related to this story, and he just does a great job overall with this book. So everything builds up into this story between Batman, Spawn, and the Court of Owls, and Todd does a great job of taking us into these characters over the course of a 3-act paradigm. I mean, the writing here is extremely well done. I'm not going to give away too much of this book because I don't want to spoil it. I want you guys to go out here and read it for yourself, but the Batman Spawn crossover is extremely well done, and it's a lot better than many of the modern comics I have had the displeasure of reading. I was really happy with the characterizations of Batman in this story. I was actually very happy with the way Spawn was portrayed. Both characters had strengths, both characters had weaknesses. The plot was extremely well done, and the cliffhangers make it where I'm possibly thinking that there's going to be a Spawn and Batman book, because we've got Clown hanging out with the Joker. I'm not going to show that because I want you to go get your own comic to see that. And Clown talking about there's other stuff that he's been planning, and that he's basically moving these Batman and Spawn around like characters on a chessboard. So there's a lot of very solid plot here as related to storytelling, and I'm really happy to see that Todd McFarlane has not lost a single step as related to storytelling. I mean, he was very solid at writing Spawn back in the 90s, and I think I would love to see him write a run of Batman stories or a Batman story arc, because his Batman is the most solid Batman I have seen in almost 30 years, because I'm really tired of the Gary Stu Batman we have got ever since the early 2000s, and I'm really tired of this Batman who's basically can do everything, can beat everybody. I mean, in this story, we see a Batman who has vulnerabilities due to his human side, and we also see a Batman who has strength because of his internal character, and we see Batman's strength as related to him being a great thinker. These are the character traits that are the strengths of Batman, and Todd really has a better sense of them than the writers like James Tynion the Fourth, Tom King, and Chip Zdarsky, who basically do not understand Batman. And I really think that this is, again, one of the best Batman books I have read in a long time. Had a very intriguing mystery, had very good use of the villains, had very good character development, and while some people, they thought that the story was weak, I mean, you have to read 90s comics to understand about why this story works. And from my perspective as a novelist and a screenwriter, the story here was very solid, and the art by Greg Capullo really popped. Now, the only thing that I wish that this book had was a nice variant cover from the master Todd himself. I believe that would have basically set this off as related to getting the sales up if we had a nice McFarlane variant cover. But I don't know if Todd's skills are still, there, because he's so busy running McFarlane Toys and running his business enterprises that he doesn't really have time to go out here and put a piece of original artwork out there, because as a writer and publisher myself these days, I'm really busy myself, so I don't really have time to go out here and draw up concepts. So I understand where Todd's time is overall, but this whole book is very well put together and does a great job of doing what good screenplays and good stories do, having endings and beginnings, and it sets up strong, and then it sets up an ending which has you anticipating more. And I'm hoping that Todd capitalizes on this with an image version where we're seeing a Spawn and Batman book that goes out here and concludes this story. I would love to see this story continue, because it's a really well done story, and it's one that I would highly recommend you go out here and get. I mean, the 90s story War Devil I had many years ago wasn't as good as this. I mean, it was one of those stories that if you were a Spawn fan, yeah, you would like it. But this one was easy for a new reader to go out here and access. It was an easy entry point, and you didn't need to read a whole bunch of Spawn issues or The Scorched. Again, fantastic books, and you didn't need to read a whole bunch of Batman. You could come into this cold and be able to enjoy this Batman Spawn crossover, and it's again a it's a dark read, but again a very good read that introduces you to these characters and makes you see why Spawn was one of the most popular characters in the 90s and why Batman has been popular for the last 80 years. Again, I highly recommend you pick this book up. Very well done book, and a good book for many of us, people who bought comics in the 90s. And if you want to go out here and see what type of story models we used to read in the 90s, your Batman and Spawn will give you a fresh take on it. And again, this is a book that I would say is just very solid, and one you definitely need to pick up if you go to the comic shop. Now, if you're online right now, you can pick up my first comic, Esteem No Good Deed, in Kindle format for just 99 cents. And I'd appreciate it if you guys would head over there and try out my first comic that I put together with artist Bill Walko, because it's the first comic I've put together, and I'm trying to find ways to get my second comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, to readers who missed out on it, and help others who want to see that book and see my style of comic storytelling. But until then, you can head over to Amazon.com and pick up much of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and vampire novels like Eternal Night. You can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me do more comic review videos and go out here and buy lots of other great indie comics on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where I do reviews of those books, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App, and that'll help me be able to buy more great indie comics and do more reviews of comics like Batman Spawn. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's Aspiring Angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today.